We're really glad to have everyone here. Please continue to get your food. If you haven't gotten any, grateful for Don Chewy's for providing the food tonight. We got a District 2 restaurant that provides food for us. So we're glad for that. My name is George Handley. I'm the current occupant of District 2 on the City Council. I'm stepping down this year and very excited to with you to get to know these three candidates who are running for the seat. We're going to try to do this without microphones because it's a little better for the recording. But if anyone in the room can't hear very well, please let us know, and we do have microphones that we can use. They'll be given a set limit of time to answer the questions, and I'm going to rotate the order in which they answer the questions. I've got questions prepared, and I'll go through some of those, and then we'll open it up to any questions you have. I know some were pre-submitted, so we have those. But you may also think of things as you're listening that you want to ask. Okay. So I'm just excited to do this because I believe so much and so passionately in city government. I think local government is an absolutely wonderful place to be. It's a great opportunity to do good in our community, and Provo has a wonderful culture of civic engagement. I always feel like it could be better. I always feel like people could vote more and be more aware of local elections. And so I congratulate you and thank you for being here tonight because of your interest. And I hope that after tonight, you'll carry your perspectives and your feelings to your neighbors and encourage them to get to know these three very fine candidates. So I'm going to start by just asking each of them to share a little bit about who they are and what core values motivate you to want to run for the city council.
First, thanks to everyone for coming out tonight. There's a lot of things you could be doing right now. I just love a lot of respect for the time it takes to come out and come listen. I also want to thank Rachel Breen for getting us food and all the work you put into doing this, and also George. So a little bit about myself. My wife and I, we were living in Uganda in 2016, and I was working on a business out there, a small business that was called Safe Boda, and they have a lot of these motorcycle taxis in Uganda where they kind of get around using motorcycle taxis instead of Ubers, and it's very unsafe. A lot of people were getting in car accidents, and a lot of people didn't wear helmets. So we started a company that basically made sure everyone had a helmet for themselves, the driver, and then the person riding on the back, and we trained them in road safety. And then when we were out there, my wife got pregnant, and we decided we didn't want to have our baby in Uganda, and we wanted to come back to the United States. And so we had, at that point in our life, we had lived in Texas, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and we said, okay, where do we want to go? And we decided to come back to Utah and make it our home. And she went to her BYU MBA, and I started a business that I'm still running to this day. It's a software business with about 15 people. And we decided to come back to Provo and make it home because we love it. We love the people, we love the mountain, we love the canyons, we love the river, and we love the BYU student community. And we're really glad we made that decision. We've absolutely loved it. I'm someone who I always like to get involved wherever I am. And so 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to get appointed to the Planning Commission, where I saw firsthand how decisions are made in the city and how those decisions affect people's lives. We had some very emotional meetings, one around Fuego Fridays, for example, where we were trying to the police were asking to revoke their conditional use permit, and that was a really difficult meeting. We had one with Rugged Grounds Coffee, that was a difficult meeting. And but as my fellow people on the Planning Commission saw how I handled those meetings, they nominated me and voted me to be the chair of the Planning Commission because of how I was able to deal with those challenging decisions and the way that I sort of processed information. The thing that motivated me to vote or to run for city council is I have 3 kids. I have an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And I want to make Provo a great place for them and keep it a great place for them for the next 20, 30 years of their life. I think there are a lot of great things about the city, but there's also a lot of challenges with growth, with aging infrastructure, with our revenue situation. And we need people who have experience with planning and strategic planning to try and address those challenges instead of simply just kind of saying, let's keep things the way they are. Obviously, we want to keep what's great about Provo, but if we don't have a strategy to deal with the challenges, it'll degrade. And so the core values that motivate me as I'm thinking about running for this is, 1, I really just love people, and I serve them and listen to them and do the best I can to create as great a community for as many people as we can. 2, I have a deep sense of fairness And so anytime something feels fundamentally unfair, I want to try and understand what's going on and try to correct that fairness. And thirdly, I have a deep sense of responsibility. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
So to be effective as a city council member, you need to learn how to get along with people who think very differently than you. Some of them may be on the council with you. Some of them may be staff members. They may be citizens. Give us an example of why you were especially qualified to get along with people who think differently than you. Yeah.
I'm going to try to talk sitting down, and if you can't hear me, please tell me and I'll stand back up. When I was 18 years old, I grew up in Gilbert. So I was born and raised a little bit in Provo. Then my family moved to Arizona, and I was in Gilbert, Arizona, a very conservative, religious Mormon community. And I got recruited to play football for a school called Occidental. It's a school that Obama went to in LA, and I was recruited to play football, and I got a good scholarship. And so I decided to go there. Didn't really think about the decision much, but just for a little bit, Occidental is about a 5,000 person campus. It's a liberal arts college in LA. And I was one of 2 members of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, and I was probably one of 10 Republicans at the time. And I just remember like my first week, people were, and this was around when Prop 8 was happening in California. And so people were very, very, very negative towards me. And during those experiences, I learned to listen to people and why they had certain assumptions about who I was and my character based on just external identifiers and markers. And I was able to help them see that I was someone who would listen to people, who would respect people. I fundamentally believe that everyone is acting in good faith, is smart, and make reasonable judgments based on their experiences. And with those 3 assumptions, you tend to be able to find common ground with people. And that's served me throughout my life, from that time as a young child through my career.
On the council, we've had to face a good number of very hard decisions in the past about potentially raising fees or property taxes for specific purposes. We've also had a city bond. When a city is contemplating trying to increase revenue in such a manner, what would be the principles and criteria that you would use to make a decision about any potential increase that would come out of the pocket of citizens?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I'll echo also, as I've met a lot of residents in District 2, there's a lot of concern with inflation over the last 5 years and tax increases. I feel like a lot of people are feeling the burn, the wallet is stretched. And I think cost of living is an existential threat, honestly, to our society. It is a huge problem. It's probably the #1 problem in America. Obviously, at the city level, your scope of how to solve that problem is limited. But I still think there's things the city can do. So taxes is one, obviously, lever we can do to help solve the cost of living. But I think there's a lot more the city can do to help address the cost of living. And we'll get into it more in another question. But on a particular case-by-case basis, if I'm proposed for a tax increase, I think the first principle that I would look at is, as a government, we get our power from the people. And as a representative of District 2, my first thing I would say, how would my constituents respond to this? How would they support or not support this? And try my best to understand that. The next principle I would look at is, if we don't do this now, will it cost us a lot more later? Oftentimes the politically expedient thing is to say no and then make the next person pay a much, much higher bill. And I don't think that's good government, and I wouldn't do that. The next principle I would ask is, are there other sources? I think there are a lot of ways you can fund things beyond property tax increases. One of the things I think we need to do as a city of Provo is have a strategy to increase our sales tax revenue. It has been going down for the last 4 years. It's down 20% as people post-pandemic have shifted their shopping online. We've lost out on sales tax revenue, and so we need a way to address that. So that's the third principle. And then last and fourth and final principle I would ask is, who is benefiting from this? And I generally want to support policies that have a high return on the investment and have a broad base of who benefits. So those are the 4 principles.
All right, well, this will kind of pick up on that question. It's a little bit of an odd question because obviously when you're running for office, you want people to vote for you. But once you're in office, you may be in a situation, well, I would say you will be in a situation in which you feel very strongly that the right course of action is X, but most of your neighbors and friends are saying it's Y. And the one way to ask the question is, will you have the courage to go with your convictions, or would you go with the popular feeling? But maybe a different way to ask the question is, I'm gonna assume that you would all say, yes, I think I would have the courage to do what I think is right. But what I want is evidence. So I'd love to hear like an example of some time when you, and maybe not everyone in the room thinks that's an important principle, but my experience on the city council, I would vote for somebody who has the courage to vote against my wishes if it's based on good principle. So do you have some examples in your life where you've been able to resist clamor for one thing that you felt was just not right?
So it's a great question, George. Thank you. I'll give an example from a while back and then a more recent example. But first, I want to start off by saying, as a representative, I think listening is very important and representing your constituency, not just your voters, but the whole everyone in your district. And I think if you find usually I feel like if you're explaining the reasoning, having a long discussion and listening to everyone in the constituency, hopefully this is a rare scenario. But a long time ago, early in my career, I was at a company and they were doing a big layoff. And I was the chief of staff to an executive and working on the layoff. And you go through all the different executives and they all have their lists. And there was one person on the list that we had just hired from BYU. She had started less than 2 months ago. And I was in this executive meeting with the CEO of the business and several executives. And I just said, I can't support this list. This is so unfair what we're doing to this person. She started here less than 2 weeks ago. They said, well, she was on the list and we run this whole business. And I said, I will not support this. If you make this cut, I am quitting. I'm not going to be part of this. And I got them to take her name off the list. That was a hard thing to do early in my career. I hadn't learned to find my voice and to stand up. Something I've done more recently that was actually a really, really hard decision that was part of this was actually deciding to withdraw from the Republican endorsement process. There's 4,000 of the 7,000 voters in our district are Republicans. And I felt like initially seeking the endorsement was a politically expedient thing to do. But as they asked me to sign a pledge that basically pledged to the Republican Party, I felt like it was fundamentally making the race partisan, and the race is nonpartisan. And so I withdrew from that process. That was a hard thing to do. Like I really, really struggled with that decision. I ultimately just had to do what I felt like was right. And if I lose the race because of it, so be it. But that was what I strongly felt like to do for the Provo residents.
All right. The city council developed a conservation and resiliency plan a few years ago, and it was then formally adopted for city planning purposes. Tell us a little bit about your feelings and level of commitment to that plan and what your qualifications are for helping the city to progress and grow in a way that is sustainable. And this starts with Jeff.
Okay. One of the things that I have admired so much about your service is your commitment to good stewardship. I think it's a core value of mine that we all want to leave the place we live better for the next generation. And it's been amazing to see Provo, I think, lead out on that in a way that feels whole, but also balanced. And I'm strongly committed to continuing that. It's very important that we have good sources of energy, that we have clean air, and that we protect our public spaces. I think there's more we can do. And I think one of the things that is an asset to Provo is like a lot of times I think people in the discourse, particularly at the national level, we talk about there's like this conflict between good environmental stewardship and business. And I just think that's not often the case. People want to live in Provo because of how beautiful it is. They want to live in Provo because of the river and the lakes and the canyons. And I think the more that we recognize that, it can be a great source of our city also. As far as personal qualifications, I would say I just have love and passion. I think I share this with both candidates I spend a lot of time outdoors. Once a week, my time where I kind of get close to God and try to get inspiration and just find peace is by hiking in canyons and getting out in nature. And I think that is something that I deeply, deeply value. And I also, my daughter cares a lot about it, and she always gets after me when I walk by trash and don't pick it up. So that's my personal qualification.
I'd like to hear what tools you think a city council has to help with housing affordability, which is very high on everybody's worry list.
So 3 years ago, when I was looking to get more involved, I had several people close to my family who were younger trying to find housing. I remember one person, one of my family members moved and they listed it and they had over 50 applications within the first hour. And as I saw my younger friends, because I'm the oldest of 7 kids, I saw my little brothers and siblings struggle to find housing. It really became something that I cared a lot about. And I started to look into it and I realized the median housing costs in Utah County is over $500,000, whereas our median income is about $60,000. That's an 8x difference, which is very, very large and one of the largest in the states. There was a recent map published just a few days ago, and we're number 3 in least affordable housing in the entire United States. And I totally hear the previous answers, but I'm just going to say, if we were to do that map is going to push all the way out into Payson and Nephi and Ganoche and all these places where we don't necessarily want students driving on. Yeah, I misspoke. Sorry. All the students driving into Provo, creating more traffic and more congestion. And so it's a problem that we actually really need to solve fundamentally. And in order to solve the fundamentals of the problem, you need to understand the dynamics. So this is something I care a lot about. So I just want to quickly give you some housing cost 101. In Utah, the cost of a house, about 1/3 of it is the land, 20 to 25% is the land. The rest, the large other is the construction cost, which is materials and labor. And then there's a profit margin. And a lot of people forget about the profit margin. So what are some things we can do as a city to actually address this issue? One is we have to recognize that just on a per square foot basis, as more people live in the city, the cost per square foot of land is more expensive. And so you need to provide smaller options. When Provo started, a lot of our houses were smaller and closer together, and it provided more of a community feel. And we need to provide some options like that again. The second thing we can do is address the construction costs. And there's a lot we can do around code requirements and zoning. And the third thing we can do is profitability. We need to work with smaller developers because large developing companies have profit margin requirements. And so if we enable small businesses and side hustle developers, they have less of a profit requirement. So those are some things we can do.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question and then open it up to you guys. Okay, so if you have questions, I'll ask you to ask them briefly so that we have time to answer. But this is a question maybe related to housing, but we have 35,000 students at BYU. We don't know that not all of them live in Provo. But we also have, we don't really know the numbers exactly, but somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 UVU students who also prefer to live in Provo. So the question is really, this is a very significant, sizable population that also doesn't tend to vote in municipal elections. So my question is, how do you see the Provo City Council's responsibilities towards the student population, and how do you balance that responsibility with the responsibility to citizens, residents here who are, old-time residents who are not here just for a few years?
When I was telling you my story earlier about going to Occidental College in California, the second part of that story is I came back from my mission, decided to transfer to BYU because, and I'm glad I did because I was able to marry my wife Rachel. So I went to BYU and I got my degree in economics. And when I got back from my mission, this was after the financial crash of 2008. And my dad and grandpa are in the audience. Hopefully they don't mind me telling this story, but they lost their home during the great housing crash. And they hit some very difficult economic times. And when I decided to transfer, so I lost my scholarship because I was good enough to play at a D3 school. I wasn't good enough to play BYU football. So I lost my scholarship. I came to BYU, and I remember my grandpa, who's 89 and back in the room, he gave me $100 bill and said, good luck. And so I drove from Arizona to BYU, and that's all I had. And so I definitely experienced this state of being welcomed by Provo as a community, despite having very little to contribute to the community. And as a result of that contribution, I feel like I've been able to give back a lot. I got a degree, got a good job. I volunteered in lots of local things, from the Planning Commission to the Utah Valley Refugees to Centro Hispano, where I helped our Latin American members of our community help find jobs by teaching them professional skills. And so I think all of our BYU students, it's easy to see them as they are, but they're our future generation. And so I think we need to see them as such and collaborate with them as such. I do agree that one of the big challenges that Provo faces is we have almost an infinite amount of demand for housing from students and at BYU or UVU or people who just want that community. And I don't want to see it as a this or that. I think we need to recognize it just as a reality and then have a strategy to deal with it. We need a lot more student housing or housing for people earlier in their life and at lower income demographics so that they can live closer to campus and places they want to live. And I think by recognizing it as a system and solving it that way, we can also protect neighborhoods, because I also hear all the time the concern that my neighborhood has become a rental for 7 or 8 renters. And so I think that's how we have to think about it. It shouldn't be either or. We need to find the solutions that solve it.
Right. Questions from the audience? Meredith.
So this.
I don't know everyone's name. I just happen to know. I'm sorry. I know your name.
This kind of builds on a question that George asked, which was like sticking to your principles. I kind of want to ask about the flip side of that. Like if you could share an example of a time when you were persuaded by new information or new perspectives to change your mind, and to realize that the right thing was actually not what you initially thought was the right thing. I'd love to hear examples of that.
So a good example, great question. A good example of this was when I was on the planning commission, Fuego Fridays, which is a dance club that is a lot of college students in our Latin American community goes to. It's on Friday nights. The police department came to the planning commission and requested that we revoke their conditional use permit and essentially not allow them to keep operating that as a dance club. It's also being used under the same conditional use permit as an event center for quinceañeras. And so when I initially saw the police's data and the case they're presenting, it seemed quite weak. The amount of data they had, the way they collected, it sounded like a lot of just like officers saying, you know, that thing's annoying on a Friday night, and so we need to solve it. And given that I think the Latin American community is very underrepresented in Provo politics, I was very skeptical of the initial case that was presented. And so I helped, you know, through the dialogue, make a lot of additional asks of the Provo Police Department to come back with and better track their data and come back. And there were some anomalies in how they were tracking their data and what they were attributing to Fuego Fridays. And we also worked to help address some of the concerns without revoking the conditional use permit, like adding security guards in the parking lot and adding lighting. And so this was a good example of collaborating. Well, it turns out another 6 months later, the police department came back with a lot better data. And it might have actually been the third time, but later they came back with a lot clearer data that this was really a community safety issue. And it changed my mind. And I realized we needed to do something about Fuego Fridays in order to protect community safety. And so we ended up revoking it for Fuego Fridays, but we did a good compromise where we allowed Epic Event Center, the one that does the quinceañeras, to maintain their conditional use permit. So that was a good example of me changing my mind.
That's in the back.
I know sometimes there can feel like a bit of a communication gap between what's going on in the council and the people that live within the district. So how do you plan to help bridge that communication gap with District 2? And then on the flip side, how do you plan to advocate for the specific needs of District 2 with the broader city council?
Question. So when I kicked off the campaign, we did a community Easter egg hunt, and we started off by buying 600 eggs and 500 people showed up. So we had to go back and buy another 1,000 eggs. And that was really interesting because like I said, you know, in serving in city government, you're on the planning commission. And while everyone here is incredible, you start to notice a pattern that a lot of similar people show up. You see a lot of similar faces. And it's a certain profile person who, you know, has the time and the ability to come out to things like this. But on that Easter egg hunt, I saw a lot of people in our district that I'd never met before. And so that gave me the idea that I think doing community events as a city councilor is really, really important. People will show, it's like I'm on the activity committee in my ward. And if we learned that when you do a trunk or treat outside, or people show up, then if you ask them to come in the church, people will show up to different things. And so if you have a barbecue, you're going to get people to show up, different people to show up to that versus a planning commission meeting. I also think it's really, really important to be accessible via text and call all the time.
I want to know if you will listen to the neighbors. Recently, our neighborhood had an opportunity to voice our opinion on a development in the only open space left on our southeast bench. The development was for 110 single-family homes, 10 feet apart, 20 feet front yard, 20 feet backyard. This is not sustainable for if you want real family there and kids playing and things. But anyway, I know there were other facilities that were going to be built there as well. But 90% of the neighborhood did not want this. I've lived in the neighborhood for 30, 40 years. And we wanted something further apart. We wanted some space for the kids to grow on and play in the front yard or backyard. Anyway, yet there was only one member on the planning commission that was willing to suggest some changes and only 2 city council members that voted against this, against the development. Would you be willing to listen to the neighborhood and the people that have lived there for so long and know what the neighborhood needs?
Thanks for the question. So yeah, I was on the planning commission around that vote. I think I have a different purview as a planning commissioner versus as a city councilor. As a city councilor, you're fundamentally a representative of the people. As a planning commission, you're part of the administration and you're asked to evaluate things against the general plan and some specific criteria. I would have probably taken a different approach to that particular property if I was a city councilor. That said, I think there are 2 separate issues in your question. One is, should the land have been sold at all? I probably would have pushed against selling the land at all and hoped that it could have been used differently. However, once the decision to decide to sell the land, I think the idea that we need to always have bigger yards or space, again, that's all cost. Even those homes that you're complaining about are going to be for somewhere between $600,000 to $700,000, maybe $500,000 if we're lucky. These are still very hard to buy homes. And so that is the challenge. Like, I agree, it would be nice, but there is a cost to all those things. And so I think you just need to look at those costs. And I think the development has a good range of homes for people who are maybe need something a little bit less expensive. And then there's up as you get closer to the mountain, more space and more expensive homes. And I thought it was a good balance. That said, it's not a perfect project and I would have done more to change it.
Okay, last question. Yeah.
I'm just concerned sometimes with overconfidence, about really difficult issues. Is there, I don't want to call it a weakness, but an element of collaboration you need to be effective? What is it that you would seek for in collaborators that you may need to fill in, or not a weakness, but something you're just not really good at?
So my business is we build a software application. We've got many thousands of users. And in the past, I built apps with millions of users. And one of the things you learn sometimes, you think you've got a great idea and you build this feature and 0 people use it. And that's happened to me a lot. And so I've learned a few things. One is you need to listen, gather data from a lot, like I agree with what has been said. But another thing too is you also need to sometimes go small. Going big from the very beginning, even if you've collected a lot of information, you feel like you're really confident, you don't actually know until you run the experiment or you actually do something. And so that's something that I would like to see done more in Provo, is what I call lean, which is how do you run the smallest, most viable experiment? Again, it's not perfect for every decision, but I think we could do a lot more piloting, a lot more experimentation in the city. And experimentation is a great way to solve complex problems because your theories are great until they meet reality. As far as specific types of people, again, as the CEO of my business, it's a software business. I am not an engineer by trade. So I have a lot of engineers on my team. And so I have to oftentimes work with people who have technical knowledge that I don't, but then synthesize it against many perspectives, the business perspective, our customer perspective. And so I hope to continue to do that in the city.
All right. I would now like you to offer a closing statement. You may have already prepared some thoughts. I'll just encourage you to do something that maybe is a little bit uncomfortable for you because you're all such nice people. But I would like you to push for yourself. I think we would like to hear why you are the one that we should vote for.
So the most important thing when you elect a city councilor or any politician is, what do they get done for you? And I think when it comes to the city council, there's a few things that make someone effective to getting things done. One is that you're able to work with people, even people that you maybe disagree with, to find common ground and make progress. The second thing is that you're a good problem solver. You're able to synthesize a lot of different perspectives and data and come up with solutions. And the third thing is you work really hard. And I think in my life, I demonstrate all 3 of those quite strongly. I've had the privilege of attending, like I said, a highly, highly liberal arts college in California as a young, little Mormon guy and making some best friends that are still my friends to this day. Going to Africa, completely different culture, some of my best friends from this day. And time again, I'm able to work with people who are different from me, find solutions and get things done. And that's what I'm committed to do, is just like I worked very, very hard to start a company from nothing that now has 15 employees, which is still small and we're still going to grow, and hundreds or thousands of users and millions of dollars of revenue. Like, I'm going to bring that skill set and my background to Provo to get things done for District 2. And I commit to that. And I commit to listen to everyone and come up with the best solutions. But I want, you know, we've talked about a lot of things that need to happen, like the part on Slate Canyon, like I will get that done. I'll find a way to get that done.